Horus descends in Phantom Nightmare. Okay, so just so we're all on the same page, the Horus cards are an already existing archetype that we will be getting in Age of Overlord already. The first wave of Legacy Horus support already arrives in Age of Overlord. The only caveat to all the fans of the OG Horus archetype is that the new Horus cards don't really have anything to do with the old Horus cards, which is a good and a bad thing at the same time. It's a bad thing because, you know, you don't get to play the old Horus cards, but it's a good thing because you don't have to play the old Horus cards because most of them are pretty outdated. The first wave of Horus support, I remember reading them a couple weeks back, and I think they are pretty damn strong cards that have a lot of potential. But as of now, and the OCG also shows that, as of now, with the first wave of support, they were only good as like a small engine in a couple other decks, right? Because the deck in itself doesn't have enough consistency. It doesn't have, you know, enough going for it. So the Horus, especially because it's just not consistent, is not really its own deck. This could change with more support in Phantom Nightmare right here. So let's look at these. Let's look at these cards. All right, first up, we got Horus, the Black Flame Deity. Level 8, everything level 8, I think, in this archetype. You can only use the first and second effect once per turn. If you control a Horus monster and a King's Sarcophagus, which I think is what everything revolves around, getting King's Sarcophagus onto the field, you can reveal this card in your hand and send one card from your hand or field to the graveyard. Send one card from the field to the graveyard. Okay. So it's removal for the archetype. If a face-up King's Sarcophagus and or Horus monsters other than Horus the Black Flame Deity you control leave the field by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. Then you can send all other monsters on the field to the graveyard. Okay. Interesting. So it heavily punishes your opponent for removing your shit with card effects. But it doesn't add any consistency. Right? It doesn't add any consistency to the deck. He also doesn't have the effect where he just comes back from the graveyard like a lot of the other level 8s do. I'm not sure how good this card really is. I'm not sure if this one's very good, but it's not terrible. Stone Wall of the Imperial Tombs. This honestly looks and feels way more like a Gravekeeper card, but I guess the lores between Gravekeepers and Horus are like not too far apart, so okay. Field spell card. You can only use the second effect once per turn. This card's name becomes King's Sarcophagus while in the field zone. Oh, that helps, I think. That helps with some of their requirements. That might be a massive deal. I'd have to go back and reread the old cards, but I'm pretty sure it was a lot about having that Sarcophagus card on the board somehow. And this being another card that is called that, I think is pretty good. During your main phase, you can add a Horus monster from your deck to your hand. Then you have to place a card from your hand to the bottom of the deck. Okay, so it's a once per turn Rhoda. At a cost, you know, you have to put back a card, which is significant, right? That's significantly worse than just adding. But still, like I said, consistency is really what it was missing. So this is phenomenal, I think. And then third effect, if you activate the effect of Horus the Black Flame Deity, you can draw a card. Oh. Now, that makes this thing a lot better, of course. Interesting. Third effect is not once per turn. You are right. The third effect is not once per turn. So if you ever manage to resolve both effects, you get to draw 2 cards. However, I will say the third effect, I think, sounds better than it actually is. Because, yeah, in theory, you get to draw cards, even 2, if everything goes right. But I think this card is honestly... The way I'm reading it, it looks kind of underwhelming. The first effect is only useful when you go second, right? You can use it when you go first, but that's big neg. Unless you really desperately need to draw a card off of this. It's like, it's very weird. You'd have to send your own card from the field to the graveyard. I'm not sure if that has any synergy within the archetype. But you'd have to reveal this, send another card from field or from hand or field to grave, and then send another card from your field to the graveyard. It's very weird having to do that to yourself. But going second, this would be a nice option. But you already have to control the Horus monster and Sarcophagus to do that. So I'm not sure. The second effect is, of course, much stronger, but it relies completely on your opponent to trigger it. Right? Effect 1 activates effect 2. No, it doesn't. If a face-up Sarcophagus and or Horus monster other than Horus Black Flame deity you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, you cannot trigger the second effect yourself, which makes it a lot worse, of course. You will basically... Effects like this one, you have to understand. When you read an effect like this one, it'll never do this, pretty much. Your opponent just has to play around it, right? So it's still a good effect to have. It forces your opponent to not remove your Horus monsters or King Sarcophagus with card effects, because if they ever do it, they lose their board, right? But it's all right. This one is phenomenal. The first effect I think is relevant. The second effect is of course really good for consistency, and the third effect I think is just a bonus that will maybe happen once in a while. I don't think this is the main selling point of this card, mainly because I don't even know if you're gonna play this card, right? Now the question here is there's actually two questions. The first question is this enough to make a pure Horus deck playable? Right? Is this enough to make the pure Horus deck consistent? Because I'm not sure if that's enough, because it only gives you some more consistency, but still I'm pretty sure it's still too far from like actually consistent for pure Horus to be good with this. And then the second question is, if you're gonna play Horus as an engine in other decks, are you even using these two cards in other decks with a smaller Horus package, right? And I think the second card, yes, right? If you play Horus cards in your deck, probably play the field spell. You know, you probably would. The first one in a smaller package, I don't think so, right? I don't think so. And that is when you're evaluating cards like this, this gives a lot of context also to the second card, right? Because if you're not gonna run the first card, the second card is also significantly worse, because you basically, this effect is not on it then, right? But I would argue the card is still good enough for just these two effects, right? Even without the third effect, this card is still phenomenal for consistency, right? So, very good field spell, mediocre effect monster, I think. But who knows, right? If we ever get more support in the future for this, and you actually do play a pure Horus deck, then maybe you play this as a way to facilitate draws off of your field spell and remove cards off of your opponent's field and make your cards also significantly harder to deal with, right? All right. Overall, honestly, a little bit underwhelmed by these cards, because from what I saw on Twitter this morning, I expected these to be better, because people have been hyping them up like crazy. And I mean, the field spell is very good, don't get me wrong, but I expected like more than two cards, and I expected them to actually make the Horus deck playable, which I'm not sure is the case off of just an additional field spell. But good cards nonetheless. I don't want to understate the power of the stone wall. Like, that card is very good, but it's not as busted as I expected after reading what happened on Twitter this morning. But all right, Horus cards, cool.